Welcome back to the Rum Ration. This is episode number 22 called 9 Days of Hellfire. This is a podcast where we dive into the defining moments, forgotten corners, and everything in between in military history. I'm Colin.
Indeed, and I'm Rejoy. And today we are going back to one of our favorite places, Colin,
Indeed.
the Western Front, summer of 1917, and to a battle that has been sadly overshadowed by its partner, the Battle of Vimy Ridge, because we're going to be talking about the Battle of Hill 70, which the Armagh played quite a part in.
It sure did.
And is on our regimental colors. And I am ashamed to say I always noticed it and never clicked what about the Battle of Hill 70 was all about. So this was a great suggestion on your part to talk about this.
Well, it was supposed to be a birthday edition, kind of like what you did for me. We're going to record this, on the anniversary on the 15th. Not your birthday, but on the actual anniversary of the Battle of Hill 70. And then you decided to... I think this is something we need to address for our listeners because we've been. You went AWOL for about a month now.
I did, and hey, you know that my great hero is Flashman.
Yes, and you've got a track record for malingering.
I do. I was just going to bring that up, as you well know. Tried it often, engaged on as well.
The amount of Sepacol and foot powder that you ended up with was staggering.
I had a little pharmacy going.
But you think of it. You think of the impact that you made. Like our poor listeners, like both of them, they've been starved of content for a month now.
Yes, I've been dealing with abusive emails while combating my stomach ailment.
We've actually received some feedback, though. We just got a very nice message from Simon McLean, speaking of Gagetown, and we were on phase training together, and he put in a birthday request for his own birthday in December. Wants us to do episode on the Battle of the Bulge, which I think we can absolutely.
I think we can absolutely do.
We'll send it up to the committee for review.
Yeah, let me just call the cats over, and you call Milo, and we'll do that. But yes, I mean, Simon, we'd be happy to take a look at that. And thank you for suggesting it as well. I think it's a great idea. It's always good when old friends get back in touch and
we've had some really good episodes. Speaking of old friends, we've got Richard Garon, who's an expert on the Battle of 1759 in Quebec City, the Plains of Abraham, and he's volunteered to be interviewed. And we've got the confirmation that someone from the Canadian Rangers is going to talk to us about their history. And that's a very important one, given what's going on in the geopolitical situation right now. But let's get ourselves back to the Western Front that Rejoy started talking about, because we're doing our favorite thing, which is going off topic. But we're going to be talking today about the Battle of Hill 70, which was fought between August 15th and the 25th, 1917, near the city of Lens, Lens, in northern France, which was a truly remarkable Canadian victory in the First World War. And for the first time in history, the entire Canadian Corps was under the command of a Canadian officer, Lieutenant General Sir Arthur Currie. And this was a significant moment, as Currie had only recently been promoted and knighted after the successful capture of Vimy Ridge in April 1917, where he had played a key planning, researching, and directing role in the overall battle.
Yeah, and there's a lot we can talk about concerning Sir Arthur Currie, can't we? And that's something I think we'll discuss, or we'll have an episode later on.
Yeah, well, one of the things I did on my canoe trip last week is I read Madman and the Butcher, which was Rob Foster, another one of our listeners, who we did phase with. I guess we should just look up the nominal role for everyone we did phase training with and send them an invite. But Rob had suggested we look into that, and so I read that, and it's fascinating. So I think episodes on Sir Sam Hughes and Sir Arthur Currie are definitely in the future.
Yes, definitely. Stay tuned for that. But let's, again, get back to the Battle of Hill 70. And start by, as we always like to do, set the scene. So we're talking about 1917, and 1917 was, to put it mildly, not a great year for the Allies, was it?
No.
We got the French army that was struggling with widespread mutinies. Though if you look at the war in general and leading up to 1917, that doesn't come as too huge a surprise.
Yeah, why do you think? What was a part of that research that we found yesterday that you might want to share with the listeners?
Well, we talked about that a little bit, didn't we? So first of all, you found out some very interesting facts. The fact, the one that really struck me was that the quarter liter of red wine per day that they received, well, that was suddenly and horrifically cut down.
Well, it started off a quarter liter, went to 3/4 of a liter. So they're being issued a bottle of red wine, 750 milliliters a day. And then they decided in 1917 to cut that back.
Not a good idea. Good idea. And then, one of the things about the French army receiving their wine is it's not like you having your, after dinner drink or, going for cocktails or anything. Wine was a staple It was
100%.
very much seen as a part of their ration. And it wasn't to get them drunk or anything per se, although, of course, that helps a lot, but given the circumstances, but it really was a part of their food. Much like the Bavarians in the German army, for them, beer was the same thing. And in fact, today, in the Free State of Bavaria, as they call themselves, you are allowed to drink beer on the job because
Really?
it's not seen as an alcoholic sort of thing. It's seen as a part of your food. I mean, you can't drink a case of beer, but you can have a beer with lunch. It's fine.
Yeah.
The other thing, of course, was incredibly poor generalship on the French side, where they get intelligence, ignore it. This is no good. Nah, we're just going to carry on with our plan. But they had a history of doing that, carry on with the plan.
Exactly.
Which led to massive casualties. And of course, many soldiers, it wasn't so much, I think, they were against fighting. They were against being slaughtered like sheep, essentially. It's like, have a good plan, do the preparation, and we'll attack. And when that happened, they were very effective.
Absolutely.
But sadly, by 1917, that wasn't the case. And so that
and they were shooting a lot of their own guys too, weren't they?
They were shooting a lot of their own guys for cowardice,
for improving morale.
Exactly, and the age-old sort of thing about you will attack if you turn back. Well, there's nowhere you're coming back to because the guys hiding in the trenches, the higher-ranking officers, are going to shoot you down. And that was very much the case in 1917 along the French lines. In many cases, not all sectors. That has to also be pointed out. Many French regiments stayed true, stayed firm, held their ground, but there was discontent. I think in the regiments that were really badly led.
And what about the other allies? What was going on with Russia?
Russia, of course, now that's the famous story of 1917. If the French look bad, well, the Russians are in a category all to themselves. You know that one thing you have to say about the Russians? Consistency. Because now, in 2025, it's a matter of time before they just run out of guys or somebody says, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. And that's happening already. They were really on the verge of collapse, and they did collapse in 1917.
Yeah, and they were having mutinies as well, and they were executing a lot of their own guys. And I found it kind of striking that the French apparently hold the record for executing the most amount of guys, just under 1,000 of their own men they shot. But the Russians, they didn't keep records.
They didn't keep records. And so, it's very convenient. And that in the Second World War, that was also one of the downfall of the Nazi regime. They kept meticulous records.
Yes.
So proof for everything. And they went to the gallows proud of it too. Well, we kept very good records. So
nothing like IBM punch cards to help you keep track of your
that's exactly it.
Kill counts in concentration camps. Yeah, great.
But not the Russians. So I would argue that the Russians executed probably far more of their own soldiers, and that collapse was just absolutely catastrophic. And so here you are in 1917. You've got the French on the verge of collapse, which put extra pressure on the British to shore up the line. You had the Russian front collapsing, despite some few successes here and there, like Brusilov's offensive was quite successful, but it was a temporary little nugget. And of course, on the home front for the United Kingdom, you had the Prime Minister Lloyd George trying to now rein back the number of troops that were being sent to France because he saw the offensives as being wasteful.
Yeah, his mindset was, if I don't send you soldiers, you can't kill them.
Exactly. And Haig was trying to explain to him, that's not how it works.
But he hated Haig.
He hated Haig. He hated Haig with a passion. Yeah. And I would argue also for the history that was written about the generals after the war and has prevailed for the longest time, portraying them as
the donkeys
idiots, the donkeys leading lions, is completely false.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with the politicians trying to justify their own stances and their record, which was far from spotless. So that's 1917.
Well, hold on. There's one more thing on context. You talk about the home front, too. You're talking about politics. But what about the German U-boat campaigns? Because we often think of that, Das Boot and all that. We think of World War II, but that got a big start earlier.
It got to start in the First World War. And they were very effective. And it was the Germans that went all in with the U-boats. So in German, the Unterseebooten. And those campaigns were crippling Allied economics and the ability of the Allies to get supplies and troops across to France.
Of course.
And it also led to the first, but these sorts of things always lead to innovation. And that's where the convoy tactics came in. Right. And the British started learning, the Royal Navy started learning how to deal with this threat, but not before they lost tons and tons of shipping. And in many cases, it really hampered their ability to carry out offensive operations just because they weren't getting the supplies they needed. And also, the difference between the U-boat campaigns in the First World War and the Second World War was the Second World War is what we're very familiar with. Them shooting torpedoes out of the blue. All of a sudden, you see a torpedo coming, and that's when you know there's a U-boat that's hunting you. Not in the First World War. They would surprise the ships by pulling up, and most of the ships were sunk by the deck guns, not by torpedoes. They would surface. There was still some sort of chivalry involved in those days because a lot of times
lack of technology.
Exactly.
They didn't have a choice.
They would also
I forgot to tell you, Rejoy, and I don't want you to go too far down the rabbit hole on submarines because I happen to know the senior serving submariner in the Royal Canadian Navy, and he has agreed to come on the Rum Ration and talk to us about the history, particularly the very start of the Canadian submarine service. So
that is going to be
scheduling this fall. Yeah,
that's going to be lovely. Okay, in that case, I'm not going to give away anything more.
All right, let's get this context train back on the tracks.
Yes, because people are wondering: are we talking about Hill 70? Or are we talking about
Hill
the
70? Where's Hill 70?
See, that's what always happens. So that's 1917 in a bit of a nutshell. Of course, at the same time, the Brits had launched their third battle of Ypres. So we've got which Passchendaele was a part of, and everybody is. We'll get into Passchendaele another day, but let's just say the offensive at Bogged Down. And so this is where Field Marshal Sir Douglas Haig, who was promoted to Field Marshal January 1st, 1917. So he was a newly crowned Field Marshal, so to speak. And he decided to order this attack on Lens, which the goal of that was to divert German troops and resources away from Passchendaele. So Passchendaele really was the reason for him to start thinking about ways to divert the Germans and weaken their hold on the Lens sector. And
right. And you and I are going to continue our long-standing tradition of pronouncing place names differently. I think someone counted 9 different versions of Ypres or Ypres, wipers, however you want to say.
Wipers.
Yeah, there we go. So, Lens or Lens itself was it was a crucial strategic objective. It was important to the Germans for its rail access, but it was also important to the British and the Allies for the coal, because Lens was a coal-producing area, and they needed that for the war manufacturing. Unfortunately, by 1917, years of artillery bombardment had reduced much of the city to ruins, right?
Yes.
It's not good for you. Make it a maze of natural strong points. If anyone's seen the movie Stalingrad, they'll know what we're talking about. It's actually easier to defend from a city that's been destroyed. Yes. And there was slag heaps, which is the byproduct of when you're pulling out coal and you've got all this leftover rock and slurry and slags, big, huge, massive artificial mounds and hills. And they fortified these. You would dig into them, the Germans. So you had these fortified hills surrounding the area. And Haig initially ordered Currie to launch a direct, no surprises here, frontal assault on Lens.
Yes, because what works better than a frontal assault, especially in a situation like that? Thankfully, Currie, who's been described as a superb tactician and one of the best military minds of all time. And very interesting, considering that his background was not really military. He was a reserve officer, but he was a civilian, essentially, and who was called up. And he had a different idea. He was incredibly sensitive about the use of troops. He hated the wasteful throwing away of soldiers' lives. And his command philosophy was attributed to saving thousands of lives. Yes. And again, you see that in his meticulous planning for the Battle of Vimy Ridge. So after studying the terrain, which, again, studying the terrain, an important step which some officers didn't always do.
Slightly overlooked occasionally.
So he decided, maybe a frontal attack, maybe that's not the way to go. In his view, he very rightly thought that it would lead to nothing more than extremely high casualties and failure. So instead, he had another idea. He proposed to capture Hill 70. Which was the high ground directly to the north of Lens.
Yeah, no accident here. His reasoning was brilliant, if you think about it. If the Canadians took Hill 70, the Germans would have no choice but to launch counterattacks to retake this strategically vital position. And Currie argued that the Canadians holding the high ground and establishing a carefully sited killing ground on ground of their choosing would then be able to inflict significant losses on the Germans as they counterattack, which they inevitably would do because of their doctrine and the vital ground that Hill 70 represented. So Currie's concept really was, let's take this area, force the Germans to come on our terms, come charging up the hill, and we'll just massacre them. Why should we attack them? Yeah. And even though the British Army structure didn't typically appreciate generals changing orders or questioning them. I think Currie, he has to be commended for his moral courage for actually challenging the field marshal. And then that Field Marshal Haig, he approved Currie's plan, although he made sure he played both sides by initially predicting it would fail. So if it's a success, wonderful, he'll take full credit for it. And if it's a failure, well, I told you so.
Well, that's how he became field marshal.
Wait, there's politics involved?
I mean, he was just in charge of the 1st Cavalry Corps in 1914, and in 1917, here he is, field marshal. I think it was the 1st Cavalry, one of the cavalry corps. And let's make no mistake about it. It's not that what Currie was saying is Lens is too difficult to target. We'll take the easy one, Hill 70. By no means. Hill 70 was not an easy target. It was a formidable defensive position, a maze of deep trenches, dugouts, and even mines with deep peacetime mines that were in the area with deep shafts and tunnels. And these offered fantastic protection to the defenders. And if you know anything about the way the Germans prepared defensive positions, they were by far the experts. Their trench systems were the best built and the most fortified on the Western Front. So you've got 5-foot-high coiled barbed wire, which made frontal assaults nearly impossible, machine guns deeply entrenched in concrete reinforced pillboxes on the slopes, well sighted. Plus, by July 1917, the Germans had introduced, flamethrowers and, of course, mustard gas, which we addressed in an earlier episode. And mustard gas blistered exposed skin and made conditions, beyond incredibly dangerous, I'd say.
Yeah, and 5-foot-high coiled barbed wire, that's just not fair for guys like you. You wouldn't be able to see over it. Come on. I mean...
that's where I would say Sergeant broken ankle, got to go back.
I think I need some Cepacol or foot powder. Or maybe both.
I was just told to tape it up and keep moving. In fact, don't tape it up because I know your ankle's not broken. So
that's right. But the Canadian preparations for this attack were extensive. And this is part of the calling card or the playbook that the Canadians would use so successfully during the First World War. And just as they'd done at Vimy Ridge, a mock-up area behind the lines was created to represent Hill 70, where the units who'd be attacking meticulously practiced the assault until every soldier knew their exact role and their exact place that was expected of them during the attack. And the real hill and its surroundings were then subjected to an ongoing bombardment, raids, gas attacks, planes flying over, daily surveillance, and then poison gas, which of course is heavier than air. And you need to refer back to our episodes that we've done previously on gas warfare. It was deployed in drums from something that was called Livens projectors, which were basically big, huge mortars firing massive oil drums filled with gas out and gas shells, sinking into the German trenches and then caverns, making it extremely uncomfortable for the defenders. So it's wonderful that they had this beautiful tunnel system that was there from the pre-war mines, or mining, not explosive mines, but mining, great tunnel system. But when it's filled with poison gas that the Canadians are dumping on you, it's not going to be a great place to hang out.
Yeah, not so good as it sort of collects over there. Just one interesting point. I mean, when you mentioned how Currie prepared a mock-up of Hill 70 and had the officers and troops meticulously examine it and practice the idea of attacking it. And there you see the first inkling or of how officers are trained even today. Do a mock-up of the ground,
of course,
get to understand it completely. And so training methods that were first discovered way back then are carried through today. I mean, updated, of course.
Absolutely. And another trendy modern term is we're all visual learners, right? So what better way to do it?
That's right. And in our beloved 14th Battalion, the RMR, was right in the thick of it. At that time, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Galt Macomb, the RMR was part of the 3rd Canadian Infantry Brigade. And their attack plan called for a tight advance, 3 battalions going in on a narrow front, each company moving up with just 2 platoons.
And a personal note, Galt Macomb ended up being a neighbor of my family farm in what was then Como, now known as Hudson, Quebec. And my dad actually remembers him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The training that Galt was putting his troops through was intense and relentless. July 1917 saw the men of the RMR drilling through everything. Bombing runs, wiring, rifle grenades, physical fitness, and of course, gas helmet drills. Because as we mentioned earlier, then gas wasn't a possibility. It was a given. You knew it was coming. And if you want a real deep dive into gas warfare, please check out our episode number 12. And of course, like and subscribe while you're there.
Indeed. So this brings us to July 27th, when 505 men of the 14th Battalion marched to Is-Noilette, or was it Noulette? I think Is-Noulette. Ixnulet, thank you, Ixnulet, to run a full battle rehearsal on a mock-up of Hill 70. They'd map out the German trenches with tape, and men with flags played the role of the creeping barrages. It was choreography with live ammo, and the attack was scheduled just days away now.
Yeah, and you said how many men?
505.
And what was the normal authorized battalion strength?
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
What was
1,000?
about 1,000 men, right? So we're going in at half. That didn't even occur to me.
Yeah. I mean, the best case scenario is most of the line battalions would have about 800.
Yeah, I was thinking 800,
at full strength. But the Armor
Yeah.
went over just slightly over 1,000 men, had gone overseas in 1914. To think of that, 505.
My
Yeah.
God.
And that was, of course, just before the real show. This is August 13th, and they made final adjustments at Mazengarb, which is a little town. Number 3 company was brought up to 4 platoons, and the rest were trimmed down to 2. So it's really interesting to watch how they were cutting and sewing and tailoring their organization, as we call it now, task tailoring, to make sure it would fit properly. So these were small shifts that could mean the difference between order and chaos once they went over the top, because much easier to control smaller units like that are focused and echelon tightly. And all of it was under, of course, the watchful eye of Major General Arthur Currie, Lieutenant General Arthur Currie, wasn't it, at this time, as a corps commander? Who was about to put his tactics and his men to the ultimate test. Yeah, I'll have to check that. I think he was Lieutenant General.
So if any listeners out there know what his actual rank at the time was, it'd be
Lieutenant General.
Please drop us a line. Yeah. And of course, artillery was key, and World War I was where artillery came into its own, really, wasn't it? The Canadians had hundreds of field guns and heavy howitzers, and they employed new techniques of fire using datum points and calibrated guns. So they were really becoming experts in the art of laying down fire. And this new way of employing artillery, it significantly improved accuracy, of course. Machine gun companies with over 128 Vickers guns were also poised to lay down barrages over the infantry's heads, designed to impede German movement and supplies. And they fired millions of rounds in the weeks leading up to the attack, making it difficult for the Germans to repair any damage that had been done to their defenses. The Royal Flying Corps provided support with low-flying aircraft spotting pockets of resistance and radioing coordinates to the artillery, which would shell those positions. So you've got the first beginnings of coordination there between air power and the artillery.
Which would really, as you mentioned, greatly speed up and improve the accuracy on things. But I also really love about this is how they were using machine guns in the indirect role. And people often, especially nowadays, modern times, you don't realize that these would fire. These were water-cooled machine guns, which you could fire sustained fire just as long as you kept feeding ammunition into the belt. It would keep firing, as opposed to now where it's in bursts so you don't melt down the barrels.
Yes.
And they would be able to deny certain areas by firing an indirect role. Pretty impressive that they figured out how to use the technology to their advantage. And to further deceive the Germans, the Canadians then conducted some larger battalion strength raids. So the big size raids, not just a couple of guys going over looking for Christmas presents. And they were discharging gas all along the front for weeks before the main assault, creating the impression of a wider attack. And they even prepared some dummy tanks and some troops on the northern flank to be exposed at 0 hour. That'd be fun. Hey, Rejoy, you're on the go expose yourself.
Turn around, head back that way.
Yeah, make sure they can see you. Wave your arms a lot, right? Yeah, we wanted to describe. But this extensive preparation meant that despite a lack of a huge, large warning preliminary barrage like the Somme, where they did it for over a week, surprise was actually achieved.
Yes, indeed. And now it'll come as no surprise to you, dear listeners. It is time for our favorite part of the podcast, the infamous Wish We Had a Sponsor segment. So this episode is brought to you by General Currie's Tactical Maple Rum.
Distilled in secret Canadian headquarters and aged in reinforced sap buckets, this rum is 100% battlefield ready, ideal for sipping, saluting, or subtly undermining British command.
Infused with grade A maple, crushed ration biscuits, and just a hint of artillery smoke, it's the only spirit approved for use in both mess halls and trench warfare.
1 shot boosts morale, 2 shots trigger a flanking maneuver.
General Currie's Tactical Maple Rum, for when the only thing stronger than your defenses should be your drink.
Amen.
Amen to that. So now we move into, the assault, beginning where the assault begins now. So it commenced on the evening of August 14th with a bombardment by Canadian artillery, damaging trenches and cutting wire. Then at 4:25 a.m. on August 15th, the Canadian infantry went over the top. The 1st and 2nd Divisions led the main assault, while the 4th Division conducted a diversionary attack on the right. They followed a rolling artillery barrage closely, with objectives taken in as little as 20 minutes, which is saying something when you know about the battles of the First World War. A new tactic involved dropping drums of burning oil into deep trenches, spreading flame and smoke to demoralize the German defenders. Well, let me tell you, that would demoralize the hell out of me.
Demoralized. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Flood of flaming oil pouring down
Yeah, it'd
towards you.
be Auf Wiedersehen, boys. So Private Raymond Duval of the Armar, who would go on to earn the military medal for his actions during the battle, recorded in his diary on August 15th, quote, "Things were popping plenty here, and casualties were again being sustained all too frequently." Now, Private Duval's wartime diary was published in 1954 and is available online via the RMR Foundation. And it offers a day-by-day insights into the life at the front and is an invaluable window into the experience of the ordinary soldier. So I encourage listeners to check it out at theroyalmontrealregiment.com/history/Duval Diary.
Yeah, and we'll post a link on rumration.ca for the episode notes. So on the night of August 14th, the men of the RMR had left the Mazengarb huts that they were in under a sky that was already poisoned with gas. So they were wearing their box respirators, their gear was loaded, and they were moving through the dark towards their assembly trenches. So imagine that. Kind of stumble your way through the dark. Your
terrifying
gas masks are probably all fogging up because it's summer, it's hot, it's gross.
Yeah.
Ugh, it's amazing that what these guys could go through and not get lost, right? At 3:45 a.m., they were in position. And 40 minutes later, at 4:25 a.m., the battle began. Thunderclap of artillery shattered the morning stillness, and Canadian guns opened up, and Hill 70 was officially underway. Private Arthur Lapointe of the 2nd Division, the famous 22nd 22nd Battalion, he described the opening moments of the assault as, and I question this because it's written in English, 0 hour. A roll of heavy thunder sounds, and the sky is split by great sheets of flame. I scramble over the parapet, and am one of the first in no man's land. The noise of the barrage fills our ears, the air pulsates, and the earth rocks beneath our feet. We reach the enemy's front line, which has been blown to pieces. Dead bodies lie half buried under the fallen parapet, and wounded are writhing in convulsions of pain.
It must have been terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And while the frontline companies advanced under fire, carrying parties from the 14th Battalion, RMR, were already at work, hauling ammunition, rations, and stretchers through the enemy barrages. Very, very important work. The other thing that people don't really, but they talk about the battles, the attacks, but this was essential in order to make any attack work. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was essential and deadly. Privates Burke and Hall were among those carrying supplies and evacuating the wounded. Even after both were injured, they refused to leave their posts. They were later killed by a shell. Lieutenant H.T. Roger, wounded as well, also stayed on duty. His wound painful, but his focus unshaken.
And up front, number 2 and number 4 companies of the RMR were fighting shoulder to shoulder with the 15th Battalion, pushing through severe shell fire. Cooperation, grit, and sheer determination were the only things keeping the line together. It was a brutal opening, chaotic, smoky, and lethal. But the Canadians were in it, and they weren't letting go. The Germans, as Currie predicted, reacted swiftly and violently. By 9 a.m. on the 15th, counterattacks began, with the 4th Guards Division seen assembling in Cité Saint-Auguste. They had to cross open ground with Canadian artillery, machine gun fire, and rifle fire, inflicting heavy casualties. Because remember, the Canadians have shaped the Germans into where they want to go. Germans will be coming up in a kill zone of the Canadians' own choosing. And throughout the battle, the Germans were determined to retake the hill, and they launched a total of 21 counterattacks over the next 4 days. Good Lord.
21. That was the German doctrine, to immediately counterattack. And a lot of times, the initial offensives, they achieved their objectives. They've got troops to take they got the trenches that they were aiming for.
For sure.
But then an immediate counterattack. So that was the German doctrine, very effective usually. But these counterattacks were consistently repulsed by the Canadian troops and their supporting artillery, which played a huge role in the battle. The fighting was incredibly brutal. Canadian artillery crews suffered heavily from heat frustration, forced to work fully clothed and in gas masks during those hot August days. And August in France can be pretty damn hot. Many had to remove their masks, risking horrible death from mustard gas, to aim guns or extricate themselves from obstacles. There was also desperate hand-to-hand combat as tenacious German attackers managed to reach Canadian lines. The Germans fired between 15,000 to 20,000 Yellow Cross, which are mustard gas shells, in addition to diphosgene shells, which we spoke about earlier in episodes as well, an incredibly deadly gas. And these cause severe blistering and terrible, terrible lung damage.
Despite the ferocity of the German efforts, Hill 70 remained firmly in Canadian hands. And while Lens itself was not fully taken during the subsequent probing attacks on August 21st and 23rd, which did prove quite costly for the Canadians, holding the high ground of Hill 70 seriously impacted the German position and gave Canadian troops a significant tactical battlefield advantage.
Yeah, that's right. But the cost of the battle was significant for both sides. The Canadians suffered approximately 9,198 casualties between August 15th and 25th, 1917. So the space of 10 days.
1,000 a day almost.
Yeah, including those killed, wounded, or missing. The cost for the RMR was especially high. Among the fallen were Lieutenant René Bourgeois, already decorated with the Médaille Militaire and the Croix de Guerre, and Lieutenant J.G. Pope. Both were killed during the fighting.
Médaille Militaire, that means he probably came up through the ranks.
That's right. Yes, that's right.
Part of the RMR culture. So several others were wounded, including Lieutenants McCutcheon, Harry Edney, and Donald McRitchie. So being a platoon commander was as dangerous then as it is now, I guess. And that was just the officers, of course, among the rank and file, whether on the front line or with carrying parties. The carrying parties, there were 17 were killed and 11 listed as missing. Most of them were presumed dead, and 80 were wounded. 39 were severely gassed.
Again, it just shows you no matter where you were in the battle, any position was incredibly dangerous, regardless of what your task was. At the battalion aid post, Captain Graham, the RMR's medical officer, worked around the clock. He processed over 375 wounded, many from the 10th Battalion, who were also in the thick of it. It was relentless work under horrific conditions, but it held the line, and it came at a price the RMR wouldn't forget. However, the German forces were hit even harder, with estimated casualties ranging from 10,000 to as many as 25,000. Including over 1,300 prisoners. Currie's plan succeeded in its attrition objective, preventing the Germans from transferring divisions to the Ypres salient.
Yeah, and you kind of hope it was more closer to 25,000. Not that I'm, looking to glorify the amount of killed, but if you're trading 9,000, what did you say it was? 9,100 to 10,000. It's basically
nearly 9,200 exactly.
It's basically even Steven, so it's not really worth it.
Yeah.
In a war of attrition, at least. But the victory solidified the reputation of Canadian troops, which had already been well burnished with the taking of Vimy Ridge and some other great successes. And it proved that Sir Arthur Currie to be a superior tactician. He himself described Hill 70 as, quote, altogether the hardest battle in which the Corps has participated, end quote. Might change his tune a little bit later, but it was praised by General Headquarters as one of the, quote, finest performances of the war, end quote. And the Canadians earned 6 Victoria Crosses during this battle. That's a lot. The highest military decoration for valor. These heroes included Private Harry Brown, Company Sergeant Major Robert Hanna, Sergeant Frederick Hobson, Corporal Philip Conowal, the only Canadian Ukrainian to receive the Victoria Cross, Acting Major O'Kill Learmonth, and Private Michael O'Rourke. So it shows that all 3 messes participated in earning bravery, and sadly, only half of them would actually live to receive the medals because Brown, Hobson, and Learmonth did not survive the battle.
Terrible. What a cost. On August 17th, after 3 punishing days on the ridge, the 14th Battalion was finally relieved by the 3rd Canadian Battalion. They pulled back to Les Brebis for a short rest, though even there the shelling followed. 1 man was killed, 3 wounded. No part of the front felt fully safe.
And from there they moved to Marly-Mines for some much-needed refitting and reorganization. A reinforcing draft, meaning some reinforcements coming over from the UK and through getting trained up, brought in 1 officer and 75 men, a fraction of what had been lost. Yeesh, that's always tough. But despite the casualties, the regiment's performance didn't go unnoticed. Major General MacDonell and Brigadier General Tuxford personally congratulated the troops of the RMR for their grit at Hill 70. They also reminded them, reputations are hard won and harder still to keep. The battle would go on to become one of the RMR's proudest moments. Hill 70 is now emblazoned as an official battle honor for the regiment and a lasting reminder of what was endured and what was achieved.
And again, for Canadian troops in general, cemented their reputation as being the premier shock troops of the British Army on the Western Front. So the Battle of Hill 70 was a pivotal moment, part of an unbroken series of Canadian military successes in the last 2 years of the war. The innovative tactics Currie employed and the sheer determination of Canadian soldiers demonstrated that there were more effective ways to fight this devastating conflict. This impressive victory, planned and carried out almost entirely by Canadians, earned Canada new respect on the international stage, even contributing to Canada gaining a separate signature on the Treaty of Versailles that formally ended the First World War. And Colin, as you well know, that is a huge thing for a Dominion at the time.
Absolutely. It's really put us on the path to full independence and full nationhood. And it's a testament to the Canadian Corps' skill and bravery. And yes, I know there will be haters in the comments who will whine to us and point out that the Canadian Corps and the Canadian divisions in particular were much stronger than the British counterparts, and our battalions were stronger. We had extra companies in each battalion. We had extra battalions in each brigade. We had extra brigades in each division. Yes, 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 I know. But we still got a lot of good shit done, didn't we? And we were tough enough and strong enough to fight and make sure that our divisions didn't get broken up and didn't follow the same path. And this battle would stand proudly alongside Vimy Ridge in our collective memory. So we hope that this deep dive into Hill 70 has shed some light on this often overlooked but incredibly important chapter in Canadian military history.
Yeah, absolutely, Colin. Absolutely. Well, that's all for this episode of The Rum Ration. Thank you for joining us.
Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. And until then, cheers to history.
To history.